twice in front of the couple's two children. Is there a reason why you didn't want to get out of the car as the officers were asking you to?
Yeah, once the officers asked me to step out the vehicle, they asked Lisa to get out the vehicle first. And once the driver said she wasn't getting out the vehicle, I wasn't going to leave my family in the vehicle by themselves. So that's what made me tell them, man.
Meanwhile, in New York City, 2 NYPD officers are under criminal investigation for use of excessive force. This surveillance video shows the 2 officers as they catch up with a 16-year-old suspect who's suspected of selling marijuana in Brooklyn back in August. Now you can see that after the suspect slows down and stops, an officer throws a punch at him. Then, after the team briefly raises his hands in the air, the other officer hits him in the head with his gun. A representative for the NYPD says that the matter is under internal review, adding that 1 officer has been suspended without pay and another has been placed on modified duty and relieved of his badge and gun. The Brooklyn District Attorney is also investigating. All of this as the family of Eric Garner has taken the first formal step towards suing the city and the NYPD for $75 million. Garner's family says officers acted recklessly and negligently in wrestling him to the ground using a chokehold during his arrest for allegedly selling untaxed cigarettes last July, and Garner died as a result. Eugene O'Donnell is a professor of law and police studies at John Jay College of Criminal Justice, and he's also a former New York City police officer. And Ezekiel Edwards is the director of the Criminal Law Reform Project at the ACLU. And thank you both for being here. And I want to start with you, Eugene, and start on the fact that what we're seeing are these relatively minor incidents. A traffic stop for a seatbelt violation, selling Lucy cigarettes on the streets of New York, resulting in incredibly violent confrontations, and in the case of Mr. Garner, in the death of Mr. Garner. Why do you suppose these relatively minor incidents are escalating so far? Is this police poor training? What's going on here?
Well, New York Police Department, they acknowledge the training is poor. They're actually rerunning everybody through the training. But I think the larger issue here is making sure police officers, especially in the Hammond case in particular, that they be told that you're using force only because it's a last resort. And that's not a choice that you're making. It's because you have no other alternative. And we need to be looking at officers individually to make sure how many officers are repeatedly having to use force versus officers who seem to be invariably able to settle things peacefully.
And I think when you look at the video of the Hammond case specifically, what it at least to the naked eye, to the untrained eye, looks like is an officer using force out of frustration because the gentleman wouldn't get out of the car. And that just in frustration, he decided to smash the car window. Are police officers allowed to do that because you're just not listening to them?
Well, it is a profound reality that when the police pull you over, you're really not free to leave. And when I tell my classes at college, they're shocked to find that out. And so the stakes are high, but you hope common sense will prevail. Supervisors are in the scene in that case, and hopefully supervisors supervise. I'm always concerned that supervisors sometimes go beyond what the officers do, rather than bringing situations down and exercising good judgment and being leaders. Sometimes the supervisors, rather than do that, they actually escalate situations. So every alternative that possible should be used before you use force in situations, especially with a minor offense with children present.
Yeah, and you definitely get the feeling that at least in the case of Hammond, you have Patrick Vicari, Charles Turner, and other unknown officers being subject to this lawsuit. And at least in the case of Vicari, according to the lawsuit, he's been named in at least 3 previous lawsuits involving the use of excessive force against citizens, as well as arrest without probable cause. And defendant Turner has been named in at least 1 previous incident. So Zeke, when you're talking about officers who may have multiple cases against them, is there some right for you as civilian to know the history of the officers on the force? Let's talk about what rights civilians have in their encounters with police.
Well, first, I just want to note that while the officers are authorized to ask somebody to get out of a car as long as the stop is lawful, there are constitutional grounds that cover what kind of force they can use. It can't be excessive. And if they are investigating a minor crime, if they're not in fear of their safety, if the subject has shown no dangerous behavior, they can't use the kind of force that was shown here in Hammond, Indiana. Another problem that you highlight is that officers who are often disciplined or actually discharged or fired from police departments then go and get jobs at other police departments. We see that all around the country. So there's not a system in place where the communities and even police departments themselves can know what an officer's history is. But I do also want to touch on the fact that you talked about enforcement of low-level offenses. We have to look in this country at the way that police are over-enforcing minor infractions in communities of color selectively all around the country. We put out a report last year on marijuana arrests that showed massive disparities in marijuana possession enforcement despite equal rates of use among blacks and whites. This is going on in communities all across America. And not only should that be examined, but then how does a seatbelt stop or a stop for selling untaxed cigarettes end up in somebody being tased, kids getting hurt, or somebody dying?
Yeah, and in the case of the NYPD case, this was a marijuana offense, which we know the Brooklyn DA has reduced enforcement, saying that they're not going to bother with very low-level amounts of marijuana. So this teenager ends up getting, beaten with the butt of a gun over something that is now in Brooklyn is codified as being something relatively minor. What about the procedure when there are children present? Because in the Hammond case, we are talking about a case where there were two kids, 14 and 8 years old, in the backseat. Are police trained or at least advised they should act differently when there are children present?
Well, we're definitely over-legislated, just to go back, and we are over-enforcing, but I also wouldn't dismiss the possibility the police would feel some concern that this event played on for many, many minutes, and people were not acquiescing. So I wouldn't just dismiss the possibility that they thought, why is this person not getting out of the car? Is there something bad that we don't see? But of course, with children present, if the adults are in danger of the children, the police have to be the peace officers, and they have to try to avoid using force if at all possible.
In this case, they didn't even acknowledge them. I want to very quickly go through. There are two pieces of law that are in play here.
I have to go on the children present.
Okay.
The ACLU put out a report this past June on the militarization of police, and we looked specifically at SWAT raids. One of the disturbing things that we found was in these SWAT raids, which were in non-emergency situations, usually for non-violent crimes, the police either knew that the children were present or didn't investigate to see whether they were present, conducted military-style violent SWAT raids that ended up injuring children, including, for instance, a flashbang grenade that landed in a baby's crib and exploded. So if they're not paying attention when they do SWAT raids to whether children are present, it's actually, as disturbing as it is, not that surprising that here they conducted themselves in this way despite children in the back.
Or in the case where it is a child, a teenager, which there doesn't seem to be much of a distinction. There's also another case, Rossstory.com has put up about neighbors who called in a burglary call because the foster child of a white family, and the child happens to be black, was going in his own house. And when he questioned police, why are you stopping me? Which is a legitimate question, he got pepper sprayed. So it doesn't seem that there's a whole lot of restraint in play.
That's ultimately the issue. The police are peace officers, so to the greatest extent possible, non-violent resolution of events has to be the order of the day.
Are people legitimately afraid? Is it legitimate when you hear people say they're scared of the police?
Do
they have a reason to be afraid?
I think the black community, particularly, you hear people who have never broken law in their lives saying that to you all the time, and that's a profound issue. And we have to stop pretending police work is done equally in our country.
Yeah.
Police work, talk about policing, we're talking about race relations in the country. That's what.
Same question.
Well, one way to address that is right now police are really much more like occupying forces in many poor communities of color. They really need to be extensions of the community. So they have to be sharing accountability and really actually sharing with the community in decisions about how does the community want to be policed and have a much more democratic process. You need transparency, you need accountability, you need more officers who are from the community. Right now we really have an us versus them mentality, and that's just going to lead to more tragic situations like
over very minor things. I can't say that enough. Eugene O'Donnell, Ezekiel Edwards, thank you both for being here. Really appreciate it. All right. We'll be right back.
You get sick, breather. Well, put on a Breathe Right strip